Now then, Darren, what have you got for us this week?
Well, Emma, let me tell you, I'm not happy with His Majesty the King because, well, the temperature's dropping and the nights are drawing in, folks. But the BBC are keen to remind us that we're in for climate change's colder days and nights. Used to be known as winter, folks. Meanwhile, Martin Lewis, the financial guru, is sounding the alarm bells. He says, prepare to shell out more for your energy bills than ever before, as January's energy price cap, the rise of that, starts to look like something like a bad hangover after a New Year's bash. I'm reminded of the story of the late Barbara Bolton. She was 87 years old, of Greater Manchester. She was a widow and a retired pharmacy assistant. Now, folks, she was so petrified by the cost of her heating last winter that she chose to brave the cold. Now, this poor soul was whisked away by paramedics suffering from hypothermia, only to pass away in hospital. A tragic casualty of this energy crisis. Now, yet as Barbara's story, of course, tugs at our heartstrings, the climate change high priests have embarked on their annual pilgrimage, this time to Dubai for COP28. At least they'll save a penny or two on their heating costs there. Dubai, with its glittering skyscrapers and its oil-laden coffers, plays host to the world's glitterati, all there to solve the world's net zero goals. It's a bit like hosting an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in a brewery, isn't it? King Charles III, our dear leader, Rishi Sunak, as well, he's there. He announced 1.6 billion quid of your money for international climate finance, but he can't find the money to help you with your energy bills. And Lord Cameron of China, they were all there. Sorry, I mean Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton, I do beg your pardon. Each of them commandeered separate private jets to grace this COP28 conference. Carbon footprint be damned. Now, King Charles III has been a bit of a prophet on climate change, hasn't he? Well, here he is back in 2009, the then Prince of Wales. He gave us a dire 96-month deadline to save the world. Well, folks, we're over 170 months later right now, and shockingly, I'm still here. It's almost as if these doomsday predictions are about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. The net zero agenda, with its climate alarmism and calls for sacrifice, seems more about stripping away power, liberty and money from folks like Barbara Bolton. It's a medley of questionable science, skewed statistics and a smorgasbord of vested interests. And let's not forget the King's sartorial blunder, sporting a Greek tie amid a diplomatic tiff over the Elgin marbles. And I say, really, Your Majesty? Such antics only serve to tarnish his image in our eyes. From, I'm going to say this, from Clown Prince to Cop King. Now, in doing so, making speeches far beyond anything our late and great Queen ever did, King Charles risks alienating large swathes of Brits who see right through the hot air billowing from these climate conferences. I think it's high time the King realised he is now King. The hot air from Dubai isn't going to heat our homes or restock our bank balances. A foolish King would continue to be the PR poster boy for placing poverty over power. Now, Emma Webb, I'm afraid to say that I'm a staunch monarchist, but I'm very upset by the King over recent days, it has to be said.
It's very unpatriotic.
It is, I'm afraid I am. I'm upset. I'm sure I'm going to get loads of emails saying how wrong I am to challenge the King like this.
You're right, though, and I think, though, that you know, King Charles, we expected he was going to be a lot more political, actually, than he has been. He's restrained himself, I think, more than anybody expected. But the reality is that it seems that the royal family are not receiving particularly good advice, it seems, because they should know very well that whether they have advisors or not, even if they were in a bubble, it would be very difficult for them to not realise. It's sort of like Marie Antoinette being locked up away from the public, not recognising that environmentalism is not an apolitical subject anymore. And actually it's the same with William. He needs to tread very carefully because these are highly politicised issues. And simply speaking at COP, and I think there was a previous year, maybe it was last year, he decided not to go. And he should be keeping his Mitt's entirely clean of all of this stuff.
Allegedly on government advice not to go.
And hopefully this isn't a sign that he's decided that actually he's not going to be as withdrawn as he has succeeded in being so far.
Benjamin, did you think the tie was a step too far? I mean, I know you agree with him on all of this climate nonsense. You'd probably quite like a trip to Dubai on this COP28.
Well, I rather like Dubai. It's a guilty pleasure. But look, you know, who was it, tell me, that spoke at COP27 in Glasgow?
Who was it?
It was the Queen, the late Queen. And so...
And did she say all of this?
She said a lot of things.
The world is going to die, we're all going to burn.
She said a lot of things about the importance of saving the environment, and she was the keynote speaker when we hosted COP. And I was incredibly proud to see someone of that generation and that life experience leading the way on that. And I was proud when King Charles opened COP this year and the whole world sits there and listens to the head of the British state talking about the biggest issue that the world faces. You might be a little Englander who doesn't want our leaders to take leadership on the biggest issue we face, but it made me proud to be British. And the fact is that people like Barbara from Bolton weren't freezing because of the costs of climate change. They were freezing because we failed to develop our own sources of heating and light and energy, and we became reliant on warlords from other countries.
As soon as Ed Miliband introduced the Climate Change Act, we started prioritising bloody windmills.
You get more desperate every week. Having to blame a Secretary of State from, 2008, 9, 10?
Yes, because that's when the rot started.
It's pathetic. The fact is that we have failed to secure our energy security, and that's one of the reasons why when things went awry overseas, we were vulnerable, and trying to blame that on why that woman from Manchester was too afraid to use her heating, while these companies make hundreds of millions of pounds. Often they don't pay the kind of tax that people would expect them to pay. Though you are completely wrong.
So we need more tax, Elliot, to actually buy more windmills and solar panels. And I'm sure you'll agree, looking outside right now, solar panels would work a treat, wouldn't they?
Well, I certainly disagree with that. And listen, the second you build more solar farms, more wind farms, that is energy that goes onto the international market. Unless you're talking about putting up a very, very high border around the United Kingdom and stopping the energy supply from going on.
That's what he usually says.
Market, then I think that argument is for the birds. I think potentially the person you have an issue with here, though, is Rishi Sunak, who didn't allow the King to go to COP27 last year, potentially sensibly, given what we've seen this year. And I think Rishi allowed the King to go this year, and I think it's not a surprise that the King used the platform to speak his mind, although I do agree that it is troubling.
Chloe, I mean, Benjamin says that I'm a little Englander, and do you know what? I would say I'm on the side of the British people. That's what I would say to that. Whose side are you on?
I am going to be a little bit in the middle ground here.
Oh, here we are. We've got a Lib Dem on the panel.
Oh, gosh. So, climate change, it used to be a non-partisan issue. And when you saw suddenly the eco-loons sitting on the ground, gluing their hands to the floor, making this movement seem like a crazy left-wing thing, then it suddenly became something political. Now, yes, we can debate how important of an issue it is. Are we all going to die tomorrow? Yes, you're right that there have been many cases of lots of scaremongering and when we're going to die being greatly exaggerated. And those haven't come true, but that doesn't mean that climate change is not a serious issue. So, how do we decide what is partisan, what is non-partisan? Just because some people sit in the road glued to the floor doesn't suddenly make it a political issue.
Just to be clear, all the major parties committed to net zero in their manifestos. So there is a democratic mandate from the three biggest parties in this country, plus several others, that says that this is what Britain is committed to, and it's written in law. And you talk about the Commonwealth and being a patriot. Well, it's Commonwealth countries, islands in our Commonwealth, that are most being affected by climate change, that are seeing rising sea levels ruin their economies, ruin their ability to live. And I think the King, the head of the Commonwealth, has a moral responsibility and a duty to those people that don't have the voice that he has.
So will you commit then to save the Commonwealth nations by not flying ever again for the rest of your life?
Look, I always think so. Well, hang on. I always say that the reason this can't be solved by simply putting up people's bills and making Ryanair more expensive, it has to be solved by technology, green technology, that means that we can get in cars and we can go on planes without the damage. And Britain can lead on that because we're a highly educated economy. I know you're not one of those highly educated people.
We're also a highly taxed economy.
Shining on.
We're also a highly taxed economy.
But we're all going to be saved by this elusive green technology.